you're about to watch a walkthrough of the Mendix Rapid Developer Learning Path. In this learning path, you will learn everything you need to know to get the Rapid Developer certification. This is a beginner-level course and made for anyone who wants to build an app. The learning path is in the description. You'll need a free Mendix account and download Mendix Studio Pro. So if you haven't set that up yet, check out the video in the description. If you already set up your account, then enjoy the video. Open Mendix portal to get started. In the top right corner, click the Create App button. You may also create a new app directly from Mendix Studio Pro desktop app. On the next page, select the blank web app as your starting point. Now it's time to name your app. Before starting the work, break down the app requirements and what needs to be worked on before the work begins. Create user stories from the Planning tab in your developer portal. Let's create an example user story. Structure your user stories like so. As an end user, I want X solution. So that Y business value. Give a description of the user story, assign a story type, and estimate the story points for the user story. Make sure to drag and drop your backlog items to the next sprint section. Now let's add more user stories. I added 11 user stories. I broke down some of the larger user stories into a list of to-dos. The story points represent the effort it will take to finish that user story. Before planning your sprint, I recommend creating a process for estimating the story points. Here's an example of a wireframe. Just like user stories, a wireframe is a way of deciding what will be worked on before work begins. It is an easy visual way to design the basic features of the app you want to develop. This app is mainly created for Jimmy himself. After discussing what Jimmy wants, I identified the following business value he needs. Jimmy wants to be able to keep track of the various trainings his company is offering. He wants to keep all his trainings up to date. He wants to be able to add new courses, assign teachers to them, and schedule them over a period of time. He also wants to be able to see who is participating in each course and when. Teachers want to be able to see when the next class they need to teach is, along with a list of students participating in order to prepare accordingly. They also want to see the details of each participant. In case participants are late, they want to be able to contact them. Epics are a way to divide your user stories into broader categories and group similar ones together. These epochs are grouped by functionality. Now, let's assign an epoch to each user story. You want your user stories to eventually be in your active sprint so you are able to see them on your Kanban board. For that to happen, you need to move them to your next sprint. Now let's start our sprint. The board page shows you how much you have progressed towards the goal of your sprint. You can see which user stories have yet to be picked up, which are currently in progress, and which ones are finished. You can move user stories from one column to another to indicate their status. After you start the sprint and you are ready to work, it's time to change a user story status from to do to in progress. According to the wireframe, we need to have a homepage that gives access to pages where information can be seen. Adjust the homepage layout to accommodate for the buttons to be created. Add the buttons. Add the pages to which the buttons will link. Link the buttons to these pages that show the information in the system. You can click and drag a user story to the In Progress section of the board. You can also double-click the user story. At the top of Mendix Studio Pro is the control bar. On the left side of Studio Pro is the App Explorer and Page Explorer. The App Explorer allows you to access all the resources of the app, and this includes pages, microflows, and navigation. The Page Explorer allows you to see all page elements and their structure when editing a page. The center of Mendix Studio Pro is the editor. This is where you will build all your resources, which will open in tabs just like a web browser. It allows typing, dragging and dropping, clicking, double-clicking, right-clicking, and standard keyboard shortcuts like copy, paste, undo, and redo. On the right side are the Properties and Toolbox panes. The Toolbox is where you will get elements to drag onto the editor. The Properties pane will display and allow editing of details of anything you click within the editor. At the bottom, you will find the Changes, Errors, and Best Practice Bot tab. Changes will show what you have changed in the app since your last sync. The Errors tab will show in real time if anything is incorrectly configured that will prevent the app from running. Best Practice Bot is an intelligent virtual co-developer bot that helps you improve the performance of your app by letting you know if you do anything that will cause your app to perform poorly. Let's change the home screen title. We want buttons on the home screen, so let's add areas for our 4 buttons. You can view the same data differently on mobile, tablet, and desktop screen sizes, and that's what we will set up. In manual mode, you can create a maximum of 12 columns. Each column must be given a weight between 1 and 12, which indicates how much of the horizontal space the column will receive. A weight of 12 means the column will take up the full width of a row. In other words, a 6 means each column will take up half of a row space. After configuring a layout for the home page, it is time to fill that layout and make it useful. You can do that by creating buttons, as you want to be able to navigate to the other pages from the home page. We can make the pages after the buttons. You can find buttons in the toolbox pane. Each button has an on-click action. A regular button has the on-click setting set to do nothing. Configure your button title, icon, and size from the Properties pane. On the left side, you can use the App Explorer to create a page by right-clicking My First Module. Page names are structured in a certain way. Each word starts with a capital letter. If you have multiple words, they are divided by an underscore. The second word should use one of the agreed-upon page types. Here are the best practices for identifying the page type. After the page is created, give the page a title and then link the page to our button. Save your progress regularly with Ctrl-Shift-S. You can also create a page by changing the on-click setting to show a page. After the Select Web Page pop-up appears, click on New. It's time to commit our changes we made. After you make the pages, you may notice that you have 4 errors. We will fix those errors later. It is not recommended to commit while there are errors in your project. However, for this project, let's commit our progress to the team server. Mendix recommends keeping commits small and only relating to one story at a time. Each page is set up with a list view widget to contain data that the user can change. After setting up the list pages, you may notice that you have 4 errors. We have those 4 errors because we have 4 pages with data containers, but no data set up yet. You will need to set up the domain model of your app. The domain model is like a mind map of entities with features called attributes. An entity acts like a cookie cutter for custom data stored in your app. The relationship between different entities is shown as a line connecting them with the relationship name. On the right-hand side, select Toolbox pane and drag an entity into your editor. Double-click on the entity and name it. Then, select New to add an attribute to that entity. Make sure the attribute type is correct. Here are examples of attribute types. Let's set up as many of the entities as we can before we connect those entities to the list view widgets. Double-click on one of your list view widgets and select the Data Source tab. Click Select and then choose the entity that you want connected to the list view widget. A pop-up will appear asking you about data automatically appearing in the widget. Click No. Now connect the rest of the entities to their respective pages. After connecting the entities to the empty data containers, there should be 0 errors. Now it's time to format how we want the data to appear in the list view widgets. Double-click on the text and click the Edit button beside the caption box. The Edit Caption pop-up should appear. Beside Parameters, click on New and the Edit Template Parameter pop-up will appear. Click Select and then choose which attribute you want to show in the list view. After choosing the attribute, click Select. Notice the index in the Edit Caption pop-up is a number in brackets. You will use this index in the template box to display that attribute. Let's do this for the rest of the attributes. We just finished our first user story. Yay! Before moving on to the next step, let's mark the user story as complete. If the user story has multiple subtasks, make sure to check off those items. After you drag the user story to Done, let's begin working on the next user story. On the left-hand side, from the App Explorer panel, you will find the domain model under My First Module. We want our app to contain data about training events, so it's time to add a training event entity to the domain model. If an entity has multiple words in the name, make sure there are no spaces between the words. The same goes for naming attributes. Each training event will have a course, location, and teacher, so we need to connect those entities to our training event. Click and drag a line from the parent entity to the child entity. A parent entity can have a child entity, but a child entity is only a part of the parent entity. In other words, a course is a part of a training event, while training events can have a course. This means that course is a child entity and training event is a parent entity. By default, you created a one-to-many relationship called training event_course. Let's connect the rest of the children entities to the parent entity. Now, we will save and mark our progress. Now we need a training event button and a training event overview page. Wait, pause. If you like this video so far and want more Mendix walkthroughs like this one, then subscribe to the channel now. We need a training event page and button. So we will first create a column container like we did for the previous buttons. Let's add one now. Remember, the numbers stand for the amount of row space each column will take up. Copy and paste the button to save time. We need our training event page to show a list of training events, so let's set this up. Double-click and set up the page by connecting the List View widget with a data source. When setting up a List View widget, it's important to format it. Let's format the list with some of the training event associations. This means we are using the course name associated with this specific training event. The same applies for the teacher and location associations. Remember to save and mark your progress as you go. It's time to create a detail page to manage each training event. So let's create a button and form page. I will start with the button, so I need a column space to set it up. Use the button to set up the form page now. I want the form page to show the course on the top. So I will use the Page Explorer pane on the left-hand side to restructure widgets in the app. For training event list items, set the on-click setting to show the training event new edit page. I added teacher, location, and course data already in the app. So let's now test the training event features. You have just formatted the data shown on each page. Now let's run the app to test if it's working properly. Notice after navigating to one of the page buttons from the home screen, The user has to click on the home icon to go back to the other pages. If all the main pages were displayed like the home page icon, we could navigate through the app easier. Let's set this up now. On the left-hand side, you will see the App Explorer. Click on App Learn Now Training Management and select Navigation. Scroll all the way down in the editor and click New Item. A new menu item pop-up will appear. Give the menu item a caption name. Select the appropriate icon. And set the on-click action to show a page. We will create menu items for the courses, locations, teachers, and trainees pages. Let's run the app to see the changes. You will see this navigation bar on the left side of the application. Notice the app has no data stored, since we want administrators to add data to the app. We will need a form page that accepts data input. We want an Add button on the right corner of each page to add data to that page. We will set this up now. On the Courses page, select the column Breadcrumb. Right-click on the column widget in the editor. Add a column to the right. Remember, we have to lay the foundation down before dragging in our button. Double-click on the empty column. We want the column space smaller, so select Auto-Fit Content for desktop, tablet, and mobile views. Now it's time to choose a button. Since we are adding data to our page, choose the Create button. After the Select Entity pop-up appears, choose the appropriate entity for the page. Double-click on the button and set button style to Success. Now it's time to set up the on-click page setting. Since the form page doesn't exist yet, click on New. When naming a form page, use the term New Edit at the end of the page name. Next, set the widget's on-click setting to show a page and choose the appropriate New Edit page. Save and run the app to test your changes. You should now be able to add new data to your app. Let's repeat these steps to set up buttons for the rest of our app pages. Finally, we will commit our progress to the team server. On the team server, you will find all the changes that members of your team have made to the app. Let's mark and save our progress. Since we completed the full user story, let's commit our progress to the team server. The boss wants to be able to add a training event from the home page of the app. So let's create that button. Make sure to run and test your changes before moving on. The teachers need to be able to see a record of the trainees who sign up for the training events. So we need to extend the domain model with an information entity. Let's set this relationship up now. Now that our domain model is configured, it's time to create our registration button and registration overview page. On the right-hand side, drag the Data View widget from the Toolbox pane into the gray column. In the Toolbox pane, switch to the Building Blocks tab and drag the Page Header with Controls widget into the data view you just configured. Naming the page header is just like formatting the other lists from earlier. Notice that from within the data view, you are creating another row below, so that you can nest a list view within your data view widget. Now format what you want seen on the list. We just formatted the list for teachers to view. Now it's time to configure our button for trainees to sign up to the training event. Remember to connect the registration entity that's associated with that one training event. Reformat the form real quick. Let's save and check out our work so far. It works, so let's mark our progress on the board and commit our changes. We want our app to autofill the course name in the form when selecting from the big list of courses. The user story has already been selected and started, so we must now add a schedule button next to the course listing. Our button will act like our previous buttons, except we want to add the autofill functionality. This means our button will need to trigger a microflow. When you need your app to follow special instructions, think of microflows. According to the Mendix Academy, microflows are named based on prefix, entity, and operation. The prefix is always 3 capital letters. ACT stands for action. You created the microflow, which was added to the App Explorer tab under my first module. The yellow sideways house object is a parameter, which means that there is a specific course object that the microflow is associated with. Working backwards, we want the training event form page to be shown after an admin creates a special training event form that already has the course name autofilled. Make sure to set up the activities by specifying which page or entity you want to use. You're about to learn a very valuable keyboard shortcut. Type Control Space to see all your options. We need the training event form to come pre-filled with the course name, Let's run the app to make sure our microflow works. It works! The course name is autofilled on the form page. Let's mark, save, and commit our progress. The Mendix Assist Logic Bot can help you configure your microflows. It analyzes the context of your app's microflow and offers the next best suggestions out of more than 40 different options. Our app can now display course listings which contain the course duration. When a teacher creates a training event for a particular course and sets the start date, it would be great if our app could automatically fill out the end date. In order to do this, we need to set up a microflow and link it to a widget on the training event form. The microflow will be triggered by input widgets, which means we have to think about when the microflow is triggered. In the training event _new edit page, double-click on the start date input widget. Open the Events tab. We need to set the onChange event to call a microflow because we want to trigger the microflow after the user has finished making changes to the start date. Remember, we need the microflow prefix, entity, and operation. In this case, the prefix for onChange is OCH. A good name is OCH_training event_calculate end date. When calculating the end date, the course is important, so we need to follow the same steps. Let's take a look at the microflow. You can see the training event input parameter, which represents the training event that the end user is currently creating or editing. Now, let's build the microflow. Drag the change object activity to the microflow and double-click on it. Remember, we are changing the training event object. Set the action commit to no. Commit means the activity will store the changes to our app database. Set refresh in client to yes. Refresh in client means any changes the user makes will immediately be visible. Remember that the microflow needs to set the correct end date when the user selects the course and start date. Next, you'll use the expression editor to write a microflow expression to calculate the end date. Click inside the expression editor and press Ctrl space. Type add days until you see something pop up in the list. Select it and press Enter. Now add the parentheses. The function should appear red because there's nothing in the parentheses. See the red X error under the expression editor to discover the correct format for the add days function. We will use the training event start date as the date and time value, and use the course duration as the integer value. There's just one problem. Since the microflow is modifying a specific training event, that means the course duration attribute is out of scope. In other words, we need a special activity in our microflow to retrieve the course duration. When you need your microflow to access data that's out of scope, use a retrieve activity. Set the source to by association to retrieve both objects that are temporarily saved within the app and to retrieve objects that are stored in the database. Set the source to from database to retrieve only objects that are stored in the app's database. Now we need access to course attributes. Let's finish that add days microflow expression. Every variable starts with a $sign. Select the right variable from the drop-down menu. Access the training event attributes by typing /. Now we have the date and time argument. It's time to set the second argument as the course duration. Now let's run our app to test our changes. Oh no, we need to troubleshoot an error. You will find your app's red error messages in the console. We can see that the error was from our microflow we just configured. Open the microflow and right-click on the first activity. We want the microflow to pause after it passes the first activity, so we add a breakpoint. Go back to the app and refresh the browser and test the app again. The activity with the red border is the activity the app paused on. In the debugger window, click Step Over to go to the next activity. Use the Variables window to see if you can figure out what's going wrong. The course duration was retrieved successfully, but the start date value is empty. If the microflow runs without all the necessary variables, then the app will crash. Before we fix this, click Continue in the debugger window to tell the microflow to continue running and finish. In order for the end date calculation to work, we need both course duration and the start date. We need to know both of these variables before we calculate the training event's end date. Let's make sure that our microflow can check for both conditions before the change object activity. We can check for conditions using decisions. Check if the user provided a start date. Give a self-explanatory caption. From the tip of the decision diamond, drag an arrow downwards to end event. Now repeat these steps again to check if a course name was selected. Right-click on the first activity and click Remove Breakpoint. Now, the app will no longer pause and be shown in the debugger when the microflow gets triggered. Run the app locally and schedule a training event. Oh no, if an event lasts one day, we don't really want our end date to be an entire 24 hours later. Let's edit the microflow and the Add Days function, so that courses that last one day can start and end on the same day. Let's test the changes. It's time to commit our work. Open the Changes pane below the editor. Remember to summarize what you did and then select the appropriate user story. Teachers need to see the number of trainees who registered for their training event, so we need to add the attribute to the training event entity. Find the domain model and add the attribute. We expect multiple trainees may register at similar times, and teachers may check the total number of registrations in real time. So we will store this value in the app database. Now let's format the training events overview page to show the total number of registrations. Now, whenever someone registers for a training event, we need to set the total number of registrations integer. Go to the registration form and open the properties of the Save button. Change the on-click behavior to call a microflow. Remember to name your microflow appropriately. Proper naming convention is prefix underscore entity underscore operation. Open your new microflow. Let's replicate the default save behavior of the Save button. Add a commit activity to the microflow. We want to see this data right away, so set refresh and client to yes. Next, add a close page activity after the commit. This will close the registration form page after the user clicks the Save button. Now we need to count the number of registrations. We need training events to be within scope, so add a retrieve activity at the start of the microflow. Set the source to by association and select the registration training event association. Since we don't want our user interface to change, set refresh and client to no. Now we need to retrieve associated registration objects that are stored in the app database. Let's count the number of committed registration objects. Counting is done with the aggregate list activity. We want to store the value of count in the total number of registrations variable. Type control space and shows $count. We want these changes to be immediately visible to all users, so we set commit and refresh in client to yes. Let's run the app locally and test our changes. It's time to create an object event handler. You will need to know 3 things. Which object-related event to listen for, when to execute, and which microflow to run. Object event handlers listen to the app, waiting for events to occur. You can connect these object event listeners to microflows you want triggered. Let's create a microflow to update the count in the event that a registration gets deleted. The microflow name will need a prefix based on the time and event chosen. Let's get rid of some activities we don't need. Add object event handlers in the domain model from the entity the event happens to. You can specify whether the event handler listens before or after a specific type of event. You must connect the event handler with a microflow you made earlier. An entity with a lightning bolt means there is at least one event handler attached to that entity. For now, let's commit the new functionality to the team server and set the user story to done. This is the perfect time to see what the Mendix Assist Logic Bot can do. Duplicate the ACT_registration_save microflow and delete all the activities. Click on the blue dot to access the Logic Bot. You can specify the activity, entity, and/or by typing it into the search tool. If your microflow is looking lopsided, then highlight the entire microflow. Right-click on any element and choose Distribute horizontally to realign the microflow. Now you know how much faster you can be with the Logic Bot. Before data can be added or changed, the app needs to be able to validate if the data or situation is acceptable. Here are some validation rules we will add. We can add validation rules to the domain model, to microflows, and to pages, depending on how global you want your rules to apply in the app. If a user attempts to get away with providing invalid data in the app, then we can make pop-up error messages or error messages under page widgets. If the validation rule is added to a microflow. Then the error message would appear in the error log. We will add some validation rules to the domain model now. Double-click on a course entity and go to the Validation Rules tab. Set validation rules for each attribute. Keep going until you've added all these validation rules. The green checks mean there is at least one validation check for this attribute. So our app creates properly structured new objects. Now it's time to make sure that the page in our app only accepts properly structured new user input. Right-click on Save and select Edit on Click Action. Let's create a new microflow and attach it to the Save button. Since this is part of the Save button, Let's set up the Save Activities first. Let's add some validation checks. In our new microflow expressions, we want the page to identify if the user left any field blank. We will add 4 decisions total because we need for validation error messages. Now it's time to add validation feedback messages. The variable is the object you are validating. The member is the input widget you want the validation message to appear underneath, and the template is the message that will be shown to the user. Let's create feedback messages for each validation rule. If any one of the decisions is false, then the microflow is forced to stop prematurely. The next goal is to make the false branches flow into the next activity. Add a merge after each decision. Delete the end event red dots. And drag an arrow from the feedback message to the next merge. It's time for the rest of them. We can't commit invalid data, so we will use a flag to signal an error. A flag is a Boolean variable. If any item is left blank, then the flag will equal false. Remember, the Mendix Assist logic bot can help you work faster. Copy and paste an activity to be even faster. If any part of the training event form is left blank, the variable we just made will turn false and flag the last decision. This way, the microflow will not commit invalid data. Now let's test our new Save button. Our next task is to add a delete button for training events. You can get a delete button from the toolbox on the right-hand side. Let's make it a small red button. We want to stay on the same page after deleting the training event, so make sure to set that up. We want training events to be deleted only when there aren't any registrations connected to them yet. Go to the domain model to set this up. Double-click on the association and set up the delete settings. You may notice a blue outline around the association, which means it has a prevention of delete applied to it. Let's log our progress. If trainees get deleted from the system, we want all their training event registrations to get deleted. This is so teachers always have an accurate head count of the trainees attending their training event. Add a delete button to the trainee overview page. Go to the domain model. Click on the Registration Trainee Association and select the Delete Objects as Well option. The red outline indicates a cascading delete has been applied to the association. We need to test our progress so far. All our changes work. All right, it's time to commit our progress. It's time to add some access rules, also known as security rules. We'll apply these rules to pages, microflows, and data so that different types of users can have only the access they need. A user could add, delete, or see elements of the app that you don't want them to. That's what we are going to fix. Let's go into App Security, where you set the overall security level and where you manage high-level security settings. After setting it to prototype level, you can demo your security rules and users will have to log into the app. First, we need to set up page access and microflow access. Notice the sudden errors represent all the pages and microflows we need to configure access rules on. Module security is where you set up the specific page, microflow, and data access for each individual module in an app. In Module Security, you will see module roles, which capture everything a certain user can and can't do. Module roles need to be connected to user roles. So if a user role doesn't have any module role assigned to it, then everything in that module is off limits. Let's set up the module roles now. This allows us to customize the experiences for different user roles using the same app. For example, teachers should be able to see locations so they know where they can train, but won't be allowed to edit the details for data consistency. If you want a user to see something on a page, they need to have access to that page. The administrator should always have access to all pages and custom logic. Trainees should only be able to check out the agenda. All other pages should be off limits. Any page element that is connected with a microflow will only be visible to module roles assigned to it. Only the administrator should be able to create, delete, and add training events. Now the errors are gone. If you go into App Security, you will see that the app status still says incomplete. We need to link the user roles to the module roles we just created. Change user to teacher and click OK. Add a new user role for trainee. We already have the module roles, so deselect the checkbox. It's time to link our user roles to the module roles. Make sure each user role is connected to the correct module roles. Now the app status says complete. In order to test the app now, you'll need to configure demo users with login credentials. In the App Security, open the Demo Users tab. When we create a demo role, make sure to set the entity to administration account. We can now log in as Mendix admin with the number 1 as the password. Click the user icon on the right side of the app to switch between demo roles and their behavior. Let's make a custom homepage for trainees. Under the App Explorer, let's open the App Navigation settings. We will set up the role-based home pages now. Identify the correct user role. Choose what page to direct those users to. Now let's test our changes. As a trainee, you wouldn't be able to see the navigation bar or other pages. It's time to set the app security level to production. Production means we need to configure who can do what with information in our app. This time, there's a lot more errors. Open the module security again and look for a new Entity Access tab. Let's set up entity access for administrators. Select all entities because the administrator needs to be able to create, delete, read, and update access everywhere. Select the administrator module role. Also check Allow creating new objects and allow deleting existing objects. Set the member rights to read and write. The teacher should not be able to create any objects, nor should they be allowed to delete them. As for the information inside the attributes, the teacher should be able to see all the information, but not change it. To achieve this, each entity should be configured individually. Select the teacher role and set the default rights for new members to none. Note that setting the default member rights for new members to none is the best practice. Default rights will automatically assign this selection as the access rule for any new attributes or associations you create in the future, potentially granting rights unintentionally. Leaving this on none will require you to individually give access for each new member. Let's set the member access rights to read. Now we can follow the same steps for location, registration, teacher, trainee, and training event entities. The total number of registrations should also be hidden from the trainee. There will be a few errors left because we allow trainees read access, but no access to the information inside the entities. The trainee should only be able to read the information inside the training event entity. Everything else should be hidden or off limits. Let's give the trainee read access for the information on those pages. Trainees have access to a page, but aren't allowed to see some information displayed on that page. This leaves an error message, so double-click on the error. Right-click the line and click Edit Condition for Visible. Check the Show the Text for selected roles. Deselect the trainee. Let's go to our app security settings. In the Administrator tab, we can set up the default login credentials. You can also remove the login page by allowing anonymous users. If we want users to create very secure passwords, we can set this up here. If you like this video and want more Mendix walkthroughs like this one, then subscribe to the channel now.